Welcome back with a look back at the 2016 Wineglass Marathon on WYDC TV, Big Fox, and WJKP TV. How do you coordinate with so many towns and municipalities?
Lots of meetings.
Yeah.
Lots of baking, too.
Right. We, it's more than a one-year process to be ready. As we've been wrapping up 2016 or getting closer to 2016, we've been talking about, well, put this on for 2017 and working for that. Truly, a lot of coordination, the efforts and communication is key, and they have ownership. The towns, the communities that the race runs through, the law enforcement, volunteer fire departments, and all the volunteers have ownership in making this successful.
Yeah, this is, the challenge we have with a race like this, which happens in any community that has races, is while this is really exciting for us and for the runners, for people that live along the race route, for people who are, trying to go about their normal Sunday business, it is an inconvenience.
Sure.
And so, we understand that, and that's why we try to work so closely with them, because there are some people who would rather not have, a one-way stretch of road on a Sunday morning.
They're turning on to Tannery Hill Road.
And that's Connor Rosenblatt.
Yep. And great visual with this footage. And with it, this year we had a number of churches that have moved their church services to Saturday and have encourage their folks to volunteer, and that really helps with the traffic control for law enforcement and helps us with having additional volunteers. It was a great understanding, great partnership on their part.
This part of Campbell we're seeing it with the full marathon now. This is where the half marathon starts. If you were to see some of those same curves in the half marathon start, it is literally a sea of people. So Campbell is one of the communities that is so critical to us because, they have both the full and the half runners running through there. And so we really rely a lot on them to keep everybody safe.
This was the 6th running of the half marathon. Previously, there had been a 3-person relay, and with a point-to-point course, again, logistically, it was too difficult to manage and not safe to have the runners driving and getting to the relay points. The half marathon is wildly successful, great demand for it. Some of the runners with the relay would run 9 miles. 13.1 is not a stretch, and the success of it is very apparent.
I should mention that the half marathon winners were Wellsville Tim Chichester, 28 years old, and Ithaca's Julianne Quinn at 27 years old. Tim finished at 1 hour, 7 minutes, 24.85 seconds, and Quinn's time was 1 hour, 18 minutes, 39.08 seconds.
Yeah, they were both course records, so each of them broke the course record. Julianne actually broke her own course record. So it was really fast. In fact, it had some impact on our setup, because when we found Tim Chichester was running, we had to sort of back our process up, because we work backwards from when we see the first finisher. We thought, we better hustle this along, because we're going to see the first finisher much more quickly. We also had a new presenting sponsor for the half marathon this year. Dresser Rand, a Siemens business. And so we had 2 of their executives holding the finish line tape, and so yet another partnership that we were happy to have.
Now that there looks like a group of people that went out together. Do you see that to be a more common thing, where there's groups as compared to individuals?
Yes, that's definitely a club, and there's one of them that has fallen off pace with the other group, but they'll train together, pace each other, and really push each other through. Because of the experiences and the destination aspect of our weekend and event, we see a lot of groups that come. We had Steel Cities from Pittsburgh, a Houston club, and that's not typical. It's not a typical thing, but it's definitely very typical for us.
Yeah, for some reason we get a lot of Texas groups who come back year after year, and you think about that is a long trip to be on a bus from Texas, but they love coming up, and we're happy to have them.
Now, was there anything new this year, maybe unplanned or planned?
Well, pretty soon you're going to see the one challenge we had this year, which was the replacement of the bridge on State Route 415. And as everyone in the community knows, that bridge came out completely. And New York State DOT was fantastic to work with from, a year before that bridge came out, working with us. And you'll see them coming up. Traffic can't go over it, but they built a pedestrian and bike bridge so that our runners could get across without having to create a whole new route. We did end up having to recertify the route, even though it only made a 10-foot difference. That's important. So we'll see that coming up in just a little bit. That was a big one.
There's Julia Snyder listing some of the racers as they come through.
Road work this summer was probably the biggest. There was a sewer project that tore up all of Cooper's Plains,
right.
But again, our partners with the town of Irwin ensured that everything went in and was ready for race day.
Yeah, Julia Snyder was actually our second place women's finisher.
And she finished with 3 hours, 2 minutes, and 55 seconds. She's from East Syracuse. There's Karen Dolge. At this point, it must be, you're getting pretty tired, I would think, right? A lot of running so far.
Well, this is just beyond the halfway point for the full marathoners. It is. They're starting to feel it at this point. Coming up, the wall, quote unquote wall that you hit is usually around mile 20. They haven't quite hit that yet, but they're feeling and pushing through that right now. There's the 305 pace group again that we saw early on, and again still a nice group, strong group running with the pace leader for that. When
does planning for next year begin? A few days ago.
Yeah, it did. Like I said, there's certain aspects that actually start before we lead into 2017. Here we are going along the course. Now we're in Cooper's Plains.
Hopefully you don't have to deal with that next year, right? Everything should be fixed.
Well, there's always something.
There's
there
the
you
bridge.
can see the bridge. That's we're now on the other side, so
Well, and like Chris mentioned before, DOT put in the bridge, but a couple days before the race, I was out at the bridge with the head engineer, making sure that everything was ready for the runners. It wasn't just we put in the bridge and we let it be. They resurfaced the bridge so it wasn't slick. They made sure holes were filled in and the surface transitioning from the road to the dirt path to the bridge and on through was safe for the runners. Again, really can't say enough about that partnership and the understanding to make everyone safe and to continue the race this year.
The reality is, though, it's a 26.2 mile course. There is always going to be some project going on along there. The challenge is making sure that we know about it and that we can make the appropriate adjustments. And we even had a water main break in the city of Corning on our 5K route and where all our buses pull out. Fortunately, it came a few days before the 5K, but those things happen. So what we've really worked on for about the last 5 years is building really close linkages with all of these municipalities, including their DPWs, so that we can, we can do what we need to do when they're doing what they need to do.
And right there was a DOT truck talking to the state police, making sure that, everything was set up. This, again, was the lead marathoners, and making sure everything was set on their end.
Yeah, we actually have DOT engineers with us all day, as well as all the law enforcement and fire department folks. So there's our
Bailey
women's
again.
lead. Yeah.
She's now running by herself. She did have somebody that she was running with earlier.
Now, other than being an amazing event, what does this do for the community?
Well, we did an economic impact analysis last year on the 2014 race, and the economic impact came in at around $4.5 million. And that's, I think, a really conservative estimate that says, not every runner brings somebody with them. Not, we had to look at zip codes to say what was the likelihood that people came and had a hotel room. I know now this year's race has got to be well above that. We actually asked runners at registration how many days they were staying, and it was substantially longer than we had estimated. So, economic impact is always a challenge to calculate precisely, but the fact that they come from so many places that are far away, they stay a long time. I mean, try getting a seat in a restaurant on Friday or Saturday night. I had a local actually say to me, they kicked me out. And I said, well, what were you doing? Well, I was watching the race. And I said, no, this is a big weekend for them. You have to be ordering. So
there's the three staying together. Mm-hmm. They're pacing each other well. They look strong. And we're approaching right now mile 20 and a half. The Pre-Fro Kids Running Track Club mans that water station at the Robert Dan intersection, and the Coopers Plains Fire Department make sure that everything's safe at that intersection and shut down.
This is a really challenging part of the course, not only because of the bridge, but because Victory Highway actually becomes one way during the race. It's one way westbound only to give the runners the full other lane. And, a lot of people live around there. There's a Victory Village is there. So law enforcement and, our coning company is really key for getting signage out to make sure everyone knows where they can go and nobody turns into these runners.
There's Jeremy Sanders. How long does it take them to have the cones placed? I mean, do they start that days before?
Days before. Actually, Thursday I was out there and they were test running the setup of a couple key intersections, and exit 43 was shut down. They were testing that, working with DOT to make sure everything was set up correctly for the closing of that, and dropping barrels at key points, so they were there for placement Sunday morning early.
Yeah, they actually started dropping equipment on Tuesday. Mm-hmm. Everything from variable message boards to signage to barrels, candles, cones. We use literally thousands there. So, it's funny. Over the 35 years, that whole formula has changed a lot. We used to have volunteers dropping cones. Now we look back on that and think, oh, how did we ever do that?
How long is cleanup?
The coning company comes through and follows the last runner and picks up the cones and waits, gets that.
So the course is
Pretty
clear
quick.
by the end of the day. In fact,
Yeah.
Market Street this year, we had the whole city taken down. Street sweeper came down and cleaned. We were open by 5 or 5:30. You'd never know a race has happened. But obviously there's a lot of equipment that has to be put away, all the water station equipment sanitized. And I have to say, after we go through that weekend, which is about an 18-hour day on Sunday, we're a little less motivated to jump into the cleanup than we were to do the setup.
There's Daniel Andrus. Now, when the runners finish the race, what do they receive?
Each runner receives a handmade, handcrafted glass medal. And when they picked up their bibs, actually, they received a bag and a long sleeve shirt. This year we did quarter zips that were embroidered. To celebrate the 35th anniversary, they get a wine glass, and we get pretty good.
It sounds
pretty good swag.
We have good bling.
Yeah,
That's Casey Spencer Moskal, I think,
Yes.
Lieutenant Spaulding's sister.
in-law. And
Lieutenant Spaulding's
Lee Tar-
sister-in-law,
yes.
yeah,
And
Chief
Chief
Spaulding's
Spaulding's sister-in-law.
Yep.
Now, we also checked with Jeff Lehman on why he would choose the Wineglass Marathon over all the ones available to him as a New York City resident.
The big city marathons are, you've got to get there quite a bit earlier. You've got to be in the city quite a bit earlier to get your bib. And if you're traveling in, the hotels are more of a production. You're standing around for an hour, sometimes in the cold weather, waiting for this race to start. So there's a lot more to it. The finish line, you walk sometimes in New York. The walk from the finish line to your van where you have your stuff is probably a mile. So and then you're shepherded in certain areas, and you're away from your family and cars, and it's fun. But there's a lot more before and after. Whereas a marathon like in Corning and Bath is one where again, it's a little more homey, and everything's a little lower key, but still professionally operated. So I enjoy these. I also will say the courses in New York and Boston have some really tricky hills because they are the world-class marathons. And marathons like Corning are not by no means easy courses. They're all 26.2 miles. There's no easy 26.2, but it's a much more scenic route and enjoyable route than the big cities, where it's just more interesting. But it's just people upon people.
A look back at the 2016 Wineglass Marathon will return in just a minute